Radio Network at ParanormalKing.com.
Welcome to the Paranormal News Insider for the week of November 19th, 2019, and episode 416. It's a lot of numbers. This is your host, Dr. Brian D. Parsons, and we are live on the Paranormal King Radio Network at ParanormalKing.com. And we've got an interesting set of stories tonight, some interesting things from all over the place. And what's weird this week is there's a lot of Bigfoot stories. We haven't had a whole lot of Bigfoot stuff this year, pretty much. Historically, there's always a big influx of Bigfoot stuff during different times of the year. But now, all of a sudden, this year has been pretty dry when it comes to Bigfoot stuff. But tonight, we've got some good and some sad Bigfoot news and some silly stuff, too. As well as some UFO things. You've probably been reading about some UFO stories. We're going to cover a couple of those, but there's a lot of interesting stuff out there right now. So kind of to give you some teasers, talk about Bigfootery loses another field researcher. We'll talk about strange screams that filled a forest in Ontario, and we'll also talk about Bigfoot trying to sell homes. Yes, he's maybe going away from the beef jerky. DNA evidence helps shape the understanding of Bigfoot's place on the family tree. We'll talk about the Nimitz encounter, offering some more details, and the return of Project Blue Book. Just when you thought it was over, it's back. So anyway, welcome to November 19th, Tuesday, episode 416, live on the Paranormal King Radio Network. Again, ParanormalKing.com. It's great to have you here tonight. Glad to see those that made it into the chat room tonight. As always, hope you guys can hear what is going on. So welcome to you guys in there. And if you're not in the chat room, you're late. So head on over to the chat room and hang out with the gang down there in the chat room. They'll be gentle. They'll be nice. Maybe. Anyway, looking at the Paranormal Conferences conventions, I have 2 on the list for 2019. 2 events left. And luckily, I've updated the calendar for 2020. So weird to see that. So weird to read that, and really strange to say that. I think the glasses are going to look pretty cool, though, with 2020 on New Year's Eve. Anyway, should get a pair of those now while I'm thinking about it. A couple of events left in the, one in the Ghost Conference area and one in the Cryptid area. So Shockfest Paraculticon takes place this weekend, November 22nd through the 24th in Las Vegas, Nevada. And we have the Sasquatch Summit, November 22nd through the 24th in Ocean Shores, Washington. And that's it. That's all I have on my list for 2019. And then, of course, I've updated the list for 2020. I've got a pretty good chunk of events lined up on my list of ghost, UFO, and cryptid conferences and conventions and events. But if you have any information about any event and would like to see it on that list, and heck, I'll even mention it here on the air, let me know. You can email me at insider@paranewsinsider.com. You can contact me on the paranewsinsider.com website on the contact link. You can also get a hold of me through Facebook and through Twitter. And I'm sure, I do have the official passenger pigeon of the paranewsinsider.com. He's officially the website courier pigeon, but I painted him like a passenger pigeon because those are supposed to be extinct. Anyway, so that's some events that are taking place the last 2 of the year. It's incredible. This year is already wrapping up, And those of you who have followed this show for a while, not a whole lot of you left. I've been on the air for about 11 years. And, my fan base has changed over time. And, being on different shows, you get a different crowd. Being on different networks even, you get different crowds. And, people move away from the paranormal. It's nothing personal. I'm sure that they don't listen to the show anymore. But anyway, I do have a nice, I don't know what you call it, an audience, suppose, of people. And I really enjoy the interaction, especially here in the chat room of watching everybody have fun. And emails and things, even hate mail. I don't mind hate mail because at least that means that people are listening. And I enjoy the passion when somebody gets mad at me and tells me that I'm a blankety blank 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 blank, and I like to do blanky and blankety blank blank stuff. But anyway, I still appreciate it. Any feedback is welcomed. Well, not all of it, but it's nice to hear from the listeners, and it means that you guys enjoy the show, and that's what I'm doing this for. I'm not doing it for me. I don't like the sound of my own voice, just like many people, so I don't do it for my entertainment. I do it for your entertainment. So let me know how you feel about things, or if there are certain stories I'm not talking about. Don't get too far into the conspiracy theory stuff, so you might have a little bit of a problem with me accepting those kinds of stories, but I do my best to bring you the top paranormal news stories and not just read you the headlines. I dig deeper into these stories with the time that I have. I don't want to spend 3 hours talking about the news or 2 hours. I think it's just too much time. So we do an hour every Tuesday night. I was on the air last week. Anybody missed the show? I think I was taking a week off. I don't remember saying that. I'm going to have to go back and listen, but I was here last week, wasn't I? I think I was. And anyway, social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, covered that. Events, we covered that. Oh, yeah. Speaking of interaction with the show, the paranormal poll is back. It's back. Yeah, where'd it go? Well, it went away. Just kind of ignored it. I pushed it into the closet along with all those ParaNewsInsider.com mugs that I never gave away. The gift closet. We got towels and T-shirts and hoodies, cups, mugs, all the stuff. I got bumper stickers, license plate holders, a little Bigfoot guys. Prize closet. Anyway, the paranormal poll, I pulled it out of the prize closet and it's out there. It's back and it's alive. And you can find that through the front page of the Paranormal News Insider official website at paranewsinsider.com, or you can go to paranewsinsider.com/vote. And you can vote on the top paranormal story of 2019. That's coming up soon, just a couple of weeks away. We're going to start the countdown on December 3rd and debut number 10, number 9, and number 8 of my personal top 10. Then the 10th, we'll do the next 3. And on December 17th, we will debut number 4, 3, 2, and 1. The number 1 paranormal news story of 2019. And this year has been an interesting year, to put it softly. Now, between tonight, I don't know how much time I'll have tonight, but the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about some of the historical top 10s. And there are some years where there's some fantastic stories. There's definitely maybe ones that come out early in the year that are definite runaways for story of the year. And then there's years where there's really not a definitive number 1 story. There's a few that are pretty good, pretty viral, somewhat important, but not really runaways. And this year is kind of like that. There's a couple of big stories, but the way I look at paranormal news stories is I don't care. Viral is one thing, but how important are they to the field? That's another piece of weight that I judge these stories on. How viral they are is important, and how widespread they are virally is important, but they have to have a positive or maybe even a negative impact on the paranormal. They have to bring something to that table for me to really judge that on. Two very important things. And that's what I'm looking at. So that's kind of how I judge these stories. I don't just take, well, this is more popular than that one, because that's not always the best story. So this year, kind of lackluster, but you'll have that. You'll have those years. There was some very important things that happened this year, and we'll try to get a little bit of time to talk about some of the potential stories, just to kind of get your mind thinking about it between now and then. But also, when we debut the top 10, we'll talk about the stories that didn't make the cut, because there's only room for 10. I could easily do a top 50 or top 30 countdown. I even thought about doing a top 20 countdown, but that's a lot of counting downs. So I keep it to a top 10. I've been doing the top 10. This will be the 10th consecutive year for the countdown. Yeah, it will be the 10th year. So it's not quite, let's see, well, not quite done it every single year. I've been on the air because way back when, 2008, we started kind of late. I started in September, and it was a monthly show. So I didn't do one for 2008, 2009, but do one in 2010. I think is the first time I actually did one. So yeah, it's been a while for doing these countdowns, but I enjoy it. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of frustration, putting things in a hat and pulling the best one out sometimes. But this year is going to be tough, and that's why I've asked you, the listeners, to vote. Help me figure out what the top paranormal story of 2019 is. And I have a few on the poll. I put To the Stars Academy, basically all the things that they've been doing, from their little rock to the attention they're beginning for the UFO field. I do have Stanton Friedman's passing on there. And last year, Art Bell was the number one story. So I really wasn't going to do somebody dying as being the top story again. I mean, Art Bell was a huge fixture for the paranormal, and he's really shaped a lot of things, including paranormal radio. So that was an important thing. Alligator sightings in the Northeast. This is something that I've paid very close attention to, and kind of, I didn't really realize it, but it's kind of been my baby. I don't think too many other paranormal radio shows have been talking about all these alligator sightings in the Northeast. See, I also have on there the new version of the Patterson-Gimlin film. Of course, the Storm Area 51 story that was pretty big. It lasted quite a long time before it deflated there towards the end. The FBI releasing Bigfoot information is also on that list, but you can vote on those. But if you also have something that you think is bigger than that, that should be the top number one paranormal news story of 2019, let me know. I also have a list of stories you'd like to see in the top 10, including Neil Gemmel's scientific study of Loch Ness, proving basically Loch Ness Monster does not exist. I also have on that list Project Blue Book television show, the new version of the Patterson-Gimlin film, just in case it didn't make your number one. Thylacine sightings, as well as the new colorized video, which was pretty cool to see that. The Loch Ness Monster sightings, which were actually a record this year, was the record number of Loch Ness Monster sightings for the 21st century. Well, that according to one gentleman who runs a website for that. The Nevada test site shooting death of a trespasser. That happened earlier in the year, and people might not remember that one. But that's one of the reasons why we do this countdown, is to kind of rehash and refresh, talk about the year that was. I think that's why we do all these countdowns. You'll hear all kinds of countdowns throughout the month of December, for all sorts of different things. We also have the Dutch UFO / Starlink story we just talked about a couple of weeks ago, or was that last week? It's all blending together to me. What about the beluga whale with the harness was discovered? The humpback whale in the Amazon forest. Yes, some really interesting stories, if you remember, for this year. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Speaking of beluga whales. Also, another poll there is, which one of the following is your favorite paranormal reality show? I won't read all those, but I'm sure there's one in there that's maybe one of your favorites. If not, if you have a different one, let me know, and I can add it to the poll. I can take one out if I have to. It's a pretty tight race, and I do appreciate those of you who have gone in there and voted. I really do appreciate that, especially for the top story, because I'm struggling this year. It's tough. I've tried to ignore it because it's, especially the top 10, I don't know how it's going to end up. It's going to be tight, and somebody out there is going to be disappointed. But that's how it is. I can't make everybody happy, and just try to make it. As long as the stories are popular, I don't think it really matters what's number one, but that's my opinion. But people do get really serious about it when I say such and such is number one. People lose their minds. But anyway, what about this last week? What's been going on in the paranormal news? Well, the cryptid news this week is kind of a sad story. Speaking of people dying, it's rather unfortunate. We get to this time frame, and you look back on UFO sightings and Bigfoot. Bigfoot became really super big in the 70s, and UFOs started to get really big in the 40s and 50s, and 60s kind of dropped off a little bit in the late 70s, early 80s with the Condon Report. But you look at some of the researchers back in those times, very good, very diehard researchers, actual researchers, field researchers, people that got out there, boots on the ground, digging, looking, talking, interviewing, hiking, and binoculars to the sky kind of people. And we don't really have that as much as we used to. The internet, the connectivity of people is kind of made this world a little smaller, and it seems like we don't have that kind of boots on the ground type of attitude anymore. It seems like everyone's a researcher instead of an investigator, and as we progress further and further, everybody gets older. Nobody gets younger that I know of, unless you found the fountain of youth out there. And it's sad. We are seeing year to year a lot of these great researchers, great investigators getting older, dying. And it's really sad to see some of these great names that are passing away. And unfortunately, our first story in cryptid news is just that. Florida skunk ape and Bigfoot researcher Tim Fasano has passed away in Florida. Fasano passed away on November 14th of what is thought to be, in different accounts, of a heart attack at age 63. He had actually been out in the field at least 3 days prior to his passing, looking for Bigfoot. Fasano spent much of his time researching and tracking down the Florida Bigfoot, documenting his research through videos on his YouTube channels that his first one he created way back in 2007. Fasano also had a radio show at one point and was considered one of the bigger names in the Bigfoot research world. His videos, however, were usually controversial due to the claims made at a lot of times, he was considered a hoaxer, like a lot of other people in the field. But he tried to present his work on his YouTube channel just the way it was filmed. He tried to avoid editing so as not to bring his integrity into question, which is one thing that I really admired about his work. One of his more prominent pieces of evidence included recording a purported Bigfoot within 50 feet and seeing eye shine, as well as a head. He had well over 500 videos on YouTube to date, many with wood knocks, howls, and other potential evidence. Fasano, again, represents a waning aspect of the Bigfoot field, of those who go out as frequently as possible to document what is happening in the woods, attempting to gather evidence in the habitats where the creatures have been seen. And sadly, field researchers are no longer a surplus as they were years ago, and many seem to make their adventures more about them than what they're in search of. Again, Tim Fasano, Bigfoot and skunk ape researcher, born on September 13th, 1956, passed away on November 14th. Also in cryptid news, a big Bigfoot story this week out of northern Ontario, Canada. Gino Mikas was out hunting grouse with his wife and grandson back on October 3rd when their trip took a scary turn. The Mikas family was wrapping up their hunting trip when a series of blood-curdling screams filled the forest, and he filmed the scene on his phone. It's kind of hard to film sounds, but the audio on phones is not really designed to record things at a distance like that, unfortunately. But who is prepared all the time with good recorders? Even digital recorders are not very good at getting the distance type of sounds. So of his encounter, Mikas said, quote, "We walked down a trail to see if we could find a bird, and on our way back to the vehicle, it started. When it let out the first scream, I thought it was a moose, but my mind changed when it screamed again and again. I've heard many different animals in the wild, but nothing like this. I grew up hunting with my grandfather for the first 12 years of my life," unquote. Mikas stated that the screams lasted about 5 minutes and seemed like loud, echoing howls. He was able to take 2 videos during the encounter, but despite the evidence, generally like most videos like this, it's created even more questions than answers. Of course, those who have listened to the video on YouTube are a house divided. On one side of the argument is that this is a genuine Bigfoot howl. This is great evidence of a creature in the woods howling, doing whatever it's doing. If it's warning people or it's asking for sugar for a recipe, I don't know what they do or why they howl, but it could be communication. But of course, on the other side of that argument is that this is probably something explainable. Probably a large animal, probably a mammal, maybe a wolf, a bear that's possibly injured. In my opinion, if you're going to ask me, it sounds to me like an injured bear. I've heard videos of injured bears, and it sounds like the repeated scream, or it could be I don't know if it's a cub, but maybe a younger bear that's separated from others. I don't know, but either way, it's really weird to hear those kind of sounds this time of the year, out of rutting season for most animals. So it's hard to tell. There and again, you got a lot of people out there in the woods that like to howl like Bigfoot. So you never know. Speculation rules the story. And as the noise is really too far to get a good idea of exactly what is making the noise, and that's part of the problem that experts have had from listening to this. Many biologists feel this is a wolf, but due to the distance the recording is from the animal, it makes it pretty difficult to tell. So let me throw that link in the chat room, which I do. I like to share the links on the chat room. That's why I recommend that you join the chat room. Jump in there. You don't have to talk. You can just hang out. That's cool. We're not going to force you. We're not going to make you talk. We're not going to make you type anything. You can just hang out with your anonymity. It could be anonymous, whatever that is. But you can see some of these links. I'll throw in some pictures as well of some of these stories, but you get a sneak peek at some of the links to these stories. And it's not always the links you're going to find on the popular news story pages like Anomalist, Unexplained, what is that website? Unexplained Mysteries. There's different paranormal news websites out there that talk about this stuff, and I don't always just take the popular one. I do research and I try to find the original source, because generally what you're reading from one place is probably just cut and paste from another place. Some people pick up a story and they'll just copy it, or they'll give their own swing to it, their own ideas or opinions, change it from a story to an opinion piece, which I don't like, because kind of confuses things a little bit. So I try to chase down the original sources, and that's kind of what I try to give to you. So if you read this one. Obviously, it's from a Canadian magazine. It's not really in the neighborhood, but it's really one of the better ones that I found about that. So anyway, do research for these things. It's what I do to help make the stories cut through the garbage that you might read, the speculation that is prominent with a lot of this stuff, and cut through and bring you the actual stories. And I'm going to go from Ontario to my backyard. Not literally, but pretty close. So last week I talked about a local Bigfoot report here in Northeast Ohio where a man claimed that Bigfoot was trying to open his front door to get his dogs. Apparently his neighbor is feeding Bigfoot bananas. So Bigfoot comes over about 8 o'clock every night. Haven't been out in that area, but I plan on hanging out soon. Driving up and down the street, look for Bigfoot. But anyway, I did mention in that story that Ohio is a pretty hot area for Bigfoot historically. And Bigfoot is frequently used here in Ohio and elsewhere as a way to get attention for things. And it's a celebrated beast in places such as Salt Fork State Park, kind of in central Ohio. Central, kind of on the eastern part, I guess, of Ohio. And there's actually a primitive campsite. It's named Bigfoot Ridge. It's pretty cool. Lots of Bigfoot sightings occur in the Salt Fork area, as well as a lot of events. So some of the Bigfoot events I talk about here on the show actually are taking place in Cambridge, Ohio, in the Salt Fork State Park. So it's a pretty prominent spot. It's about an hour or so south of me. So that's where a good chunk of the sightings in the last, say, 15, 20 years have been taking place overall, other than a few big ones that have happened in other places. And a few weeks ago, here on the show, I did a story where a realty company was inspecting houses for ghosts. And another story that I read this year, I don't think I reported on this one, but I remember reading about it. They had clowns appearing in some of the photographs used for listings of houses. Now, that one was pretty creepy. It's probably why I didn't talk about it here. But Century 21 Goldfire Realty here in Northeast Ohio, the agent Shauna Bailey from Ravenna, Ohio, is using Bigfoot as a tool to get some attention for some of the homes she's attempting to sell. Actually, one home that she's attempting to sell. Bigfoot appears in a few photographs of the yard and some of the rooms in the home. There's an appearance in the kitchen of one listing sipping some coffee, apparently. Maybe something a little harder. I don't know. There's also one where Bigfoot is reading a newspaper in the bathroom, while using the bathroom. I actually have pictures. Don't worry, he's not using the bathroom, but just some of the pictures of that listing. It's an interesting way to sell homes. And I've seen lately there's a lot of these gimmicky things where people are doing stuff like this. I think it's cool. Yeah, so here's a picture. It's kind of a montage. So there's 3 pictures there. You can see Bigfoot there on the right out in the yard. There's no red circles. You can pretty much see him. You can see him in the kitchen there. And he's on the throne there, doing what Bigfoot do. So Bailey had purchased the costume around Halloween and had intended to use the costume to sell some vacant property. Now she was talking to some clients, some people who were trying to sell their home, and they were interested in using the creature to sell their home. Now, not all the pictures of the home have Bigfoot in them, and not all the photo ideas that she came up with worked out. Bailey told WOIO, Channel 19 News in Cleveland, she said, quote, "I had one where he was peeking in the window, but I thought that might be too much," unquote. Now, the reason for Bigfoot in the listings, to get some attention. And pretty much to get some attention. Other agents have mentioned that they like the use of the creature in many of the pictures, and she's obviously getting free exposure through the media because here we are talking about the story here on the Paranormal News Show that's broadcast pretty much all over the world. Bailey commented, quote, "I try to take the stress out of home shopping," unquote. And that's true. Buying a home can be challenging, and looking at picture after picture of a property after property after property can be a daunting task for somebody searching for a home. Having something like this is a welcome distraction and certainly puts this home in the minds of those who are searching through dozens of listings. It's weird too. It's strange that it's also noted in the story, the strange coincidence that Bigfoot is thought to be about 6'4" in these photographs. And strangely enough, this is actually the same height as her husband. Interesting. Yeah, I've seen this before. I forget where. I think it was somewhere down south, maybe in North Carolina or so, where people were using Bigfoot as a prop to sell homes. But it's good. I think it's a welcome distraction. I think it's healthy. It's not as long as it's not covering up things that are wrong with the home or anything like that. But this looks like a nice home, and be interesting to see if Bigfoot helps sell a home. Will he get compensated for it, or probably not? Probably not. So there's a link in the chat room for that story, and we're going to stay here in the cryptid news area with Bigfoot. We'll talk some cousins of Bigfoot. You might have seen this story floating around. It's kind of interesting the way they've been presenting the story. And again, this is why I like to go to the root of the story, because if you read some of these headlines, they're very, very misleading. Is the thought that comes to mind here, because they're talking about Bigfoot discovered and different things like that. That's not true. Or the extinct cousin of Bigfoot being discovered. But in reality, the story doesn't really have much to do about Bigfoot in and of itself. And one of the more prominent thoughts about what a Bigfoot could be, other than an interdimensional alien, which has seemingly gained a lot of popularity in the last decade or so. I don't know why. It doesn't make sense, but to each their own. One popular theory is that this is a surviving creature that's evolved from other human-like creatures, especially the Gigantopithecus. Either way, the creature has survived completely undocumented since its disappearance from the fossil record about 100,000 years ago, or this creature is a new genus, so it's just kind of evolved on its own, or this is just a bunch of Gigantopithecus that have just eluded being seen, captured, bones found, or anything else for over 100,000 years. I suppose it's possible. Not very likely. But that's one of the leading hypotheses or theories about what Bigfoot is or could be. But speculation aside, scientists have done some groundbreaking work with DNA on tooth enamel gathered from Gigantopithecus bones that date to about 1.9 million years ago. So Gigantopithecus stood around 10 feet tall and weighed up to 600 pounds and lived in Southeast Asia, with southern China being the epicenter of many of the fossil finds. The creature is thought to have lived from about 9 million years ago until around 100,000 years ago. Granted, all of this evidence or the speculation about how big this creature was or how tall it was and all of these drawings and different things, it's all based on about 2,000 teeth in 4 partial mandibles. So they don't have any leg bones, thigh bones, hips, arms, or anything like that to really show the size of these creatures. But it's just generally guessed from the size of their teeth and jawbones. So it's kind of, to me, is a little speculative, but they're using it based on what they know about other upright bipedal hominids, like your cousin Joe. Scientists recently created a new method for recovering as well as reconstructing protein sequences from dental enamel They tested this method on samples of Gigantopithecus teeth and compared them to known great ape samples of today. Lead study author Enrico Capellini, an associate professor at the University of Copenhagen, told Life Science, quote, "What we observed is the number of differences in sequences. We assume the lower the number of the differences, the closer the two species are related, and the later they diverged," unquote. Through this study, scientists determined that the Gigantopithecus is closely related to modern orangutans, not humans, not chimpanzees, orangutans. It's thought that Gigantopithecus split from orangutans around 12 million to 10 million years ago. And Gigantopithecus are generally depicted as large orangutans, even though we have no idea what they actually look like. But they do look like their cousins, and it's official. They're part of the family now. You know, maybe this is one of those like send out tests. I don't know. You get those in the mail or whatever. You mail it out. I don't trust those. I don't trust those at all. And yes, so these new findings will now solidify that belief that they are related to orangutans. But it doesn't help us here in the Bigfoot field. Doesn't get us any closer to Bigfoot at all. But you know, it's pushed out there with the Bigfoot word because they know that there's a little bit of similarity to the height, the size, and a lot of theories about Gigantopithecus. So, of course, they use Bigfoot to sell stories and get people to read it. And let me throw that link in the chat room. Again, that's Live Science. Usually pretty skeptical kind of stuff, but they've done a really good job with this and other stories I've read throughout the years. It's a great website. And there you go. And that is it for cryptid news. We're going to jump into UFO news this week. And we're going to go to, well, I guess California. This is where this took place. This is getting a lot of attention lately. But Popular Mechanics, I had to, again, this is another one of those stories where it's out there to, gosh, 3 dozen different websites have published stories on this. But generally, they all come from Popular Mechanics. That's where the interview took place. It was an online interview between 5 people who claimed to have had really close or actual sightings of these things during this encounter back in 2004, the Nimitz UFO encounter event. It's a pretty lengthy article, but it's very good. The article has spawned a lot of other articles from other online writers, and they are focusing on the apprehension and destruction of some of the tapes and other information that collected visual evidence on the intercept of the Tic Tac object encountered 100 miles off the coast of California in November of 2004. The Popular Mechanics article focuses on the perspective of the 5 men who came forward as witnesses to the event. These men have also participated in the YouTube video, which is titled The Nimitz Encounter, and also frequently appear on paranormal podcasts and UFO conferences. And if you're interested in that, I will post that YouTube link. It's a 32-minute documentary called The Nimitz Encounter. It really dives deep, no pun intended, on this event. Kind of covers it kind of in the old television show UFO format of, you know, the CGI type reenactments with some really over-the-top actors doing vocal work for that as well. But it's pretty interesting, nonetheless, to watch the 32-minute video. But the article discusses the events that led to the initial discovery of a strange object that was initially thought to be actually their new radar systems malfunctioning. They had seen some blips on the radar screen, and they thought it was what they call clutter. So they took the systems down, turning things off, turning them back on. That's usually what we do, unless you're on an airplane flying in the sky. You don't want to do that. But usually computers and things, yeah, you just turn them off and you turn them back on and hope for the best. So the systems were brought down, brought back up, recalibrated. But instead of getting rid of the clutter became sharper. The objects were initially sighted on November 10th, and the sightings continued until the 16th, all while about 100 miles off the coast of San Diego, California. So there's a bunch of ships, a bunch of Navy ships out there doing tests. So there's just for 2 weeks they were out there shaking down equipment, testing things, and doing whatever they do out there in the ocean. Prior to deploying to, I forget where they're deploying to, but just a 2-week shakedown, just no ordnance, just out there in the ocean testing equipment. The initial sightings had groups of 8 to 10 of the objects moving at about 100 knots. It doesn't seem to be, sounds like it's fast, but it doesn't really seem to be that. To me, it's only 100 miles an hour at altitudes of around 30,000 feet. It's kind of low for aircrafts. Sometimes the objects would suddenly drop down to near sea level in just a matter of seconds. The radar signatures did not match any known aircraft. They were not taking any known travel paths, and the aircraft did not have transponders. So initially, the radar operators kind of ignored this. They didn't see these as threats of any sort, but after a while, it became a little bothersome. So yes, a knot, I believe, is 1.1 miles per hour, I think, something like that. But not too fast, not too much faster. So anyway, November 14th, 2 FA-18 Hornets were sent to intercept the objects. They got within a mile of one of the objects, and they noticed down on the water, there was something underneath the water, something large, but still somewhat visible from the surface, hiding underwater or sunk, submerged under the water, whatever that is. Suddenly, a small white object flew into view, and that small white object was also described as being solid white, shaped like an elongated egg or a tic-tac shape. And, of course, the tic-tac shape won. That's pretty much what we call it now. That's the shape that's stuck. It was approximately 46 feet in length. The object had no visible wings or any other identification that would suggest it's a known aircraft. So no tail, no N number, no nothing, no flashing lights, no headlights, no propulsion, no engine, no nothing. The most interesting piece of the intercept was that the anomalous aerial vehicles, so weird to say that, just used to saying UFOs, the anomalous aerial vehicle, AAVs, took evasive action when the aircraft approached them. That's not normal. While the object was videotaped by these aircraft, the video of the incident was classified and it was not for public consumption. Well, that was until the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences published a 1-minute, 16-second clip of the Nimitz encounters in December of 2017 through the New York Times. And ever since then, there's been a number of revelations about what happened that day. And now we have accounts of strange people showing up, demanding the tapes of various aircraft and taking them from the ships. However, there are many that know that many times tapes, well, they just get recorded over, even ones that were meant to be saved. So there's actually a little bit of doubt behind some of the claims. A few of these men made the same claims that people showed up on their ship, jumped out of a helicopter, knocked on the door, took their tapes, and just walked away, never to be seen before or again. And it's kind of almost like a Men in Black kind of story about these tapes being taken. Don't say nothing, I'm going to take these. There's also some doubt that many of the details described by the slowing, growing circle of purported witnesses to these events on the Nimitz are being blown out of proportion or could also be fabricated. There's also speculation that the seizure of data may point toward this being an exercise. It could be possible that the objects were seen were some sort of classified drones being tested during those 2-week exercise. Either way, it's commonly agreed that there was an object intercepted by the United States military that performed maneuvers that seemed to defy the law of physics. All of the hearsay and speculation aside, the focus should just be on what was in the skies that day. I don't care about people taking tapes. I don't care about this cover-ups and dark conspiracy theories. None of that really matters. To me, it's just a distraction of all these things. So, yeah, there was radar data. But again, all that data, according to these gentlemen, was scrubbed. And the radar data is one thing, but the video is another. So we have the video of the Tic Tac object. It's in IR. Purportedly, the original video was so clear that you could actually tell the object was white and had these little like fin-like objects on it. But now we're stuck with what we have. Let me get that link in the chat room for you guys, so you can devour that. I'll also throw the YouTube link in there separately, and so you can watch that at your leisure. That video, again, 23 minutes long. I'm sorry, 32 minutes long. Dyslexic tonight. And it just basically goes through the entire story, pretty much what I told you. More dramatic fashion. It's like watching it on TV, I guess. A little CGI. So there's that, and throw the YouTube link in there. Boom. And boom. So you can copy and save those or watch them on the side, whatever you decide to do. What would we do without YouTube? Probably speculate a lot less, I guess. No, it's nice to have a way to show stuff without paying for cable and things. Anyway, that's one UFO story. We got one more UFO story, and I've just kind of seen it talked about. Mentioned in the chat room. We've talked about the show already. And finally announced. We've been waiting a long time for this. And once the, let's see, one story considered for this year's top 10 paranormal news story of 2019. Yeah, I did mention this. The debut of the new series on the History Channel called Project Blue Book. So that's a potential story for the top 10. Will it be number one? I don't know. I don't know if it has enough oomph to it to be number one. But never say never. You can vote on this. You go to the vote link there on the paranewsinsider.com website, and who knows, maybe it will be number one. Should have put the story of Bodie McBoatface. I think people might vote for that. The television show takes a dramatic and fictional look at the life and investigations of unidentified flying objects in the 1950s by Dr. J. Allen Hynek. The series, led by executive producer Robert Zemeckis, was quickly picked up for a second season, but we've been patiently waiting months and months and months for an announcement as to when this was going to debut. We all kind of figured, at least I kind of figured, it would take place the same time of the year that it did last year, and it's been confirmed. The second 10-episode season will kick off on Tuesday, January 21st at 10 p.m. Eastern. But again, check your local listings just to be sure when that time arrives. The second season will begin by exploring. You might have heard of this. This is kind of I think it's a pretty famous event, a famous UFO event. They talked about a lot there in season 1, talking about the Washington UFO sightings and just really different cases. but I'm not sure if you've heard of this one. It's called the Roswell. Does that ring a bell? The team will also get a sneak peek at Area 51. And you can get a sneak peek as well. There is a teaser video. I'll give the link to that. It's also a YouTube video. It's pretty exciting. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of interesting things that look to be happening in this very short season. It's actually, I don't know, I kind of go in different directions with this. There's a lot of fiction attached to these cases, and especially, I mean, obviously in the first season, but I was really kind of, I don't want to say annoyed by that or distracted by that. But eventually I just kind of accepted it. Okay, this is what they're going to do. And it is what it is. So I just settled in. I enjoyed it for what it is. It's entertainment. Never mind, it's actually on the History Channel. But, they're taking historical events and kind of adding a little bit of fiction and entertainment to it. So, what are you going to do? The history is vague, and it's pretty spotty at best. They throw a lot of things together, a lot of speculation. They've added this intrigue and conspiracy theories, this global conspiracy theory thing to it to help drive the story instead of just being a case-by-case, week-to-week story. They've got this underlying thing going on. But it's pretty interesting. And to me, I got hooked on it. I wasn't sure how I would feel about it. But I do like it. Again, I take it for what it's worth. But it's delivered on bringing an interesting story of conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, and mixed in a few pretty famous UFO cases on top of it. So it's intriguing to look at real people, real events, kind of thrown in a fictional world. But it's, I don't know. It's again, you can't take it as real. And I think that was a struggle there in the beginning, that people were disappointed in this series because it wasn't historically accurate. And I didn't see how they were going to get away with that anyway. History, in reality, is boring TV if you're going to make a drama series, especially 10 episodes. So they had to do what they had to do. But I think the History Channel, granted, how much real history is on the History Channel anymore anyway? It's kind of a weird place to have this show, but nonetheless, I'm excited to have another 10-episode season. And again, the second season of Project Blue Book returns Tuesday, January 21st. And there's a YouTube video. You can get a sneak peek of it for season 2. You can either search for it or you can be in the chat room where I'm going to post that right now. But fear not. During the week, I do post these stories to my social media outlets. Again, Facebook, Twitter. Those two are actually connected. So anything I put on Facebook goes to Twitter. And that is at Paranews Insider. And Facebook is facebook.com/Paranews Insider. I'm also on Instagram, but I don't really post much on there other than when I do pictures at events. And yes, someday, I'll start writing some blogs. Definitely want to start blogging about those alligators. Got to write about that. And we'll see. But anyway, I'm excited for the top 10 paranormal news stories coming up in a couple of weeks. And to kind of talk about that, that's 2 weeks away. My goodness. It is creeping up very, very quickly. So probably, when we start the countdown, I'll dig more deeper into the historical top 10. We'll get a little closer. We'll talk about last year as well as the last 10, 12 years. And, like I said, this year has been a little weak in the stories, and you'll have those years. You'll have years that are down years. But imagine way back in 2008 when I first started this show. The story that actually started this show was the Georgia Bigfoot hoax back in I guess July, August, September. It kind of all came unwound. The 2 Georgia boys got caught with the rubber suit in the ice chest with possum parts and things in there. What a disaster that was. What a black eye for Bigfootery in general. But the Georgia Bigfoot hoax was one of the biggest stories of the year. But 2008 also had a couple of other big stories. The Montauk Monster. This is probably the most viral photograph of 2008. This viral picture of a weird-looking creature on the beach of Montauk, Long Island, took the internet by storm. You had all sorts of people weighing in on it, professionals, animal experts. Everybody was giving their 2 cents about what they thought this thing was. The general consensus was it was a bloated and deferred raccoon. So a raccoon that was just thrown in the current, washed up on the beach, and there it was, the Montauk Monster. One of the pretty much biggest viral stories in cryptozoology history. But that year also had another big story. That was the year of the Stevensville UFO encounter, where UFOs were storming over the compound of George Bush. And a highly documented event. People don't talk about that one anymore, but that was a big deal back in that time frame, 2008. And I didn't do a top 10 back then, but I do have those as the top 3 stories of 2008. And of course, 2009, well, it wouldn't challenge it. My first full year of doing this show, you had the return of the Montauk Monster, so a different creature that looked very similar to the original one, washed up near the same area, Montauk, Long Island. And we had a wind turbine that had a UFO crash into it. It wasn't really a UFO, it just kind of fell apart. Those wind turbines do that. They fall apart quite frequently. But yeah, it was a pretty weak year for stories in general. And again, you'll have that. You'll have those years that are down years. You'll have those big years that are big years. Yeah, but yeah, well, I guess we can talk about 2010. So 2010 was the first year I actually did a full countdown, a full top 10. It was the first year I did a full season. Granted, I was doing a monthly show, and then towards the end of that year was when I did a weekly show there towards September. So yeah, a question in the chat room. The Rick Dyer, I don't like mentioning their names because they're hoaxers, but Matt Witten and Rick Dyer, yeah, and that's Rick Dyer went on to be a prominent Bigfoot researcher. Go figure. Started out as a hoaxer, but there it is. 2010 was, not really a huge year. Take, for example, number 10. The 10th story was a gentleman named Mike Green, who was a member of the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, BFRO, down in North Carolina. He made the top 10 because of a video he shot, a thermal video of a Bigfoot creature taking a candy bar from a stump. He claimed that the images would look different if it was a person in a suit. But again, we really couldn't see the creature anyway because it was a thermal video. So, there's a lot of questions about it, the validity of it. But it was a pretty big story. And it was a pretty weak year. Hoaxes of Bigfoot never seem to slow down. It's always something that's in the news. And sometimes it's unintentional hoaxing. But this one, I don't know. The jury's still out. I don't think they ever came to any conclusion about this. The number 9 story back in 2010 was a photo found of a ghost girl standing in the doorway of a fire. Supposedly took back in 1995. And of course, the guy didn't see it at the time. He just took a picture and there's a girl standing there. This photograph appears in a lot of books and magazines throughout the years. supposedly a real Bigfoot, real ghost picture. It's in some of those ghost books of real ghost photographs. But unfortunately, another person found the original. It's from a postcard in the 1920s of the image of this girl standing there. It's just superimposed on this picture of a fire. So busted. Busted. Number 8 story was Bigfoot, again, North Carolina, again. A 15-foot long, 8-inch wide track. And it attracted a lot of people down to North Carolina. Lots of Bigfoot stories. And there was another one also in June in the area where there's a 911 call. It's a recent ongoing run-ins with Bigfoot a number of times on his property. Got a lot of attention for that. Number 7, British physicist Stephen Hawking warning against alien contact. That story we've talked about a number of times, off and on through the years. Stephen Hawking, genius, sadly passed away a few years ago, but warned us that this story of inviting aliens is kind of like Christopher Columbus discovering America. I mean, think about the natives in that scenario. But it's a story that fluctuated throughout the paranormal media for the entire year. Number 6, the Higgs boson of the so-called God particle. Scientists were getting closer to the Large Hadron Collider near Geneva, Switzerland. People thought that this was going to turn the world inside out. And I thought it was going to make some really big headlines about potentially paranormal things down the road. Jury's still out about that. Number 5 was Chupacabra. So a lot of Chupacabra sightings in Texas in July, a number of them within a few miles of each other. And number 4, that was number 5. That was number 5. Number 4 was the search for Yeren, the Chinese Bigfoot. Scientists gathered in the Himalayas looking for the elusive cousin of Bigfoot. Wasn't found, though. Number 3 was a prediction. Stanley A. Fulham predicted a tentative show of UFOs over multiple major cities, and it would happen on October 13th of 2010 in a book. Well, guess what? October 13th, 2010, over the skies of New York City, dozens of people watched as UFOs hovered over the city. There was rumors that airports were shut down, but that didn't happen. It wasn't real. There was a minor evacuation due to a gas smell, but not to a UFO. But it was a pretty big story when it broke. People were freaking out over that. But talking about UFOs shutting down airports, the number 2 story that year was the Zhoushan, China, shut down their airport over a supposed UFO encounter. But there was no evidence to back up that sighting at all. The number 1 story of 2010 was Monday, September 27th. Multiple U.S. Air Force officers gathered at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. to hold a press conference about their knowledge of UFOs. This led to pretty much the biggest word of 2010. That was disclosure. It seemed that we were very close to disclosing evidence the government knew about UFOs. And we don't have to wait a few more years till the videos that we talked about on tonight's show came to light. So kind of an interesting prediction. It's always nice to go back in time and look at some of these stories. And we'll visit some of these other top 10s as we get closer to the 2019 top 10 paranormal news stories of 2019. But for now, I will be here next week. Don't think I'm taking another week off. I didn't take last week. I was here. So I will see you next week. But for now, keep your eyes in the skies, your ears in the woods, the hair standing on the back of your neck, and always keep your mind slightly ajar. And above all else, don't stop believing. For the Paranormal News Insider, this is Dr. Brian D. Parsons reporting.